to computer. Okay, right. So I'll just check see if we're live. Would seem so. Right.
You're drinking a whiskey, Martin.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Actually,
That's awesome.
I've just had dinner and it is a little sneaky Chardonnay.
Don't worry, I had an aperitif of Guinness, so we're all good. Tried to get in the UK mode, you know, had some Guinness and
Exactly.
ready to go.
Fantastic. Okay, I think we're live now. So hello everybody, welcome to Vinarchy Down Under Part 3. I'm Kelvin Guest from Guest Wines, bringing you Vinarchy in collaboration with My Wine Life and David Burton Sommelier. Today we're going to ask, so what is so good about Australian Pinot Noir? But before we do, could I get you guys to give a brief introduction of yourselves? We'll start with Meg first, if that's okay.
Hi, I'm Meg Brodman. I'm the responsible for education and global outreach, a title that means nothing and everything at Rob Dolan Wines in the Yarra Valley. I'm a winemaker by trade. I've only moved to Rob during the COVID period, leaving a winemaking position that I had in the Yarra Valley. I've been consulting in the Yarra Valley for many years. And prior to that, I lived in Chile for 8 years where I worked as a winemaker. I'm married to a winemaker, so we lived and worked in Chile. And then prior to that, I spent 6 years based in Europe, based in the UK, working for a UK-based company, Cellar World International, consulting to a whole heap of wineries in Europe. So, yeah, I've been everywhere. Back home now.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Jenna?
Hey everyone, so I suppose that my role at the moment is currently at a venue in Melbourne in Australia called The Recreation. I'm working there as an assistant sommelier and manager, but I've been working in the hospitality industry for a little while now in Melbourne, and I've got to meet amazing folk along the time, worked at some pretty great venues, but pretty blessed. I've also tried some awesome drops along the way. So I suppose my role is a little bit different to the winemaking side. I'm on the other end of that and get to sell their beautiful stories and see people consume incredible wine while having a great time together. So that's where my background comes from.
And does an awesome job as well.
Oh, thanks, Martin.
Oh, that's sweet.
And we'll swing over to Tasmania and Damien.
Yeah, so hi guys. Thanks firstly for allowing me to be here. So I'm originally a Tasmanian boy. I grew up in the Cold River Valley, which is about 15 minutes outside of Hobart, so like real run country. Had the opportunity to work around almost 20 years worth of hospitality. I've done everything from buffet to really high-end class restaurants. So I worked for Guy Grossi, Donovan Cook in Melbourne. I had the opportunity to come back here to Hobart and work for the Miwa Group, which is a Chinese restaurant, and fantastic wine list, 3-glass top wine list appreciation that you can get in Australia. And I was able to push that up to the best medium-sized wine list of Australasia, 2017. Probably more of an avid consumer of wine these days than really in the wine game, but really love where the Tasman wine game is going, and that's probably it.
Okay, thank you very much. And last but not least, Martin, please do tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Kelvin. Well, great to be here and welcome everybody. I'm actually up in Sydney at the moment, seeing my family for the first time in about 5 months. So
wow, that's great.
We've been in lockdown up here, well, in Mornington for over 100 days. So thoughts are definitely with you guys and going through everything there. But look, a little bit about me. I started, I suppose, as an enthusiastic consumer and someone who has had a great interest and love in wine. It started caravan trips with my parents very young through Barossa Valley, the Eden Valley and Clare Valley, and through South Australia, etc. And it sparked a great interest, and that really stayed with me. It was really not until I was in my late 30s that I had the opportunity really to, I suppose, pause my career and really go out and look to do what I loved, what I wanted to do, which was to be in the wine industry. So I spent 2 years looking all over Victoria, Tasmania, New Zealand and South Australia, and I basically ended up with narrowing it down to Yarra Valley and Mornington Peninsula as two great places to grow Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, and I suppose cool climate wines, but Tasmania, of course, very much so as well. Beautiful areas that all offer different things, but all have fantastic conditions for growing those wines. So I met one of the three families that had got together to set up a little mini cooperative called 10 Minutes by Tractor. They just made their first, released their first wines, and really were looking for someone to take it over, realizing that it was quite a big undertaking. So when I came across that and the Mornington and everything, that sort of fell into place very quickly, and it was that was back in 2003, and so yeah, since then really been building 10 Minutes by Tractor, and started with really the three main vineyards, of course, and opened a restaurant and added some vineyards since, and yeah, it's been quite a journey over the last 17 years.
It sounds fantastic, and can't wait to taste your wine. Could I just go around everybody again? Because just a bit of pain, the Facebook Live didn't pick up on everybody else's introduction except Martin's. We've got Martin. So can we just give a quick brief overview just of you other guys, just so everybody else knows who you are? So I apologise for that. It's just the beauty of technology here. So we'll go backwards this time. We'll go the other way. So if we start with Damien, and then we'll go on to Jenna, and then we'll last but not least, we'll talk to Meg. So Damien, if you just quickly reintroduce yourself.
Yeah, so hi guys, Damien Byrne. I guess even what I didn't previously say before, at 23, I was one of the youngest certified sommeliers in Tasmania from the Quartermaster Sommeliers that passed really in the early days of sommeliering in Australia. I'm originally an original Tasmanian that grew up in the Coal River Valley, which is 15 minutes outside of Hobart for anybody that knows that, but real wine country. Like there's 50 vineyards, I think now in the Coal River Valley, 20 years worth of hospitality, buffet, cocktail bars, sommeliering, real high level sommeliering, Guy Grossi, Donovan Cook, Miwa, won some great awards, and yeah, just really passionate about Tasmanian wines.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, Jenna.
Hello everyone. Currently I'm based in Melbourne, and I'm working at a little venue just outside of the city called The Recreation as the assistant sommelier and manager, but have been very fortunate in my career over the time that I've been in Melbourne to work amongst some amazing sommeliers and quite a few different venues. So my perspective tonight probably comes from a different side of the winemakers, as Megan Martin will influence on that. Probably sit on the other spectrum, which is more of the enjoyment of it rather than the hard yakka behind it. But yeah, really pleased to be here tonight and excited to talk about the Pinot scene and broader wide scene in general of Australia and the world. So thanks for having us.
Thank you, it's a pleasure. And Meg.
Hi, I'm Meg Brodman. Welcome everyone. I'm currently responsible for education and global outreach at Rob Dolan Wines. I'm a winemaker by trade. After I finished my winemaking degree, I worked in the Yarra, which is my home, for a couple of years, then spent the next 14 years travelling the world, ending up in Chile, working as a winemaker with my winemaker husband before returning to Australia, consulting in the Yarra Valley, working with wineries as winemakers in the Yarra Valley before starting my current role in the middle of COVID.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for joining us. So I think, without further ado, we should taste some wine. So can we start with Martin's first? So Martin, while we're having a taste, could you talk through it and tell us a little bit about the wine that we have here? It's the 10 Minutes by Tractor Estate Pinot Noir 2018.
Better make sure we've got the same wine, but yes, I think we do. We do. Oh, there we go. Great. Good on you, Damien.
Brand marketing as well.
Bit of brand image there.
Never goes astray.
That's right. That's right. Anyway, thank you, Kelvin, and I said welcome everybody. It's great to be here. And yeah, the 2018 vintage, great, really interesting vintage. We've had a sort of a really interesting run of vintages through sort of 15 to 19 or 20, and 18 was sort of started off after the 17 vintage was quite a small vintage for us. We had quite cool weather during flowering, etc. So our crop was down by about 40%. And when we went into the 2018 vintage, we started off with some quite heavy rains in the winter. It sort of delayed bud burst, and we thought, here we go again. But the spring actually started to warm up. We got some really lovely warm weather, not dissimilar to what we're actually experiencing this year. And so we had really good fruit set and a really good consistent crop. So really good yields, and we had a lot of sort of even maturity, if you like, across the vintage. So it was interesting. It was, as I said, it was a delayed start to the vintage. It was the second latest bud burst, but we ended up picking this. The grapes of these wines were sort of picked from both up and down the hill, as we would say, on the Mornington Peninsula. Mornington is southeast of Melbourne, about an hour's drive, and as you come up to Mornington, you come from the lower sections up into the rolling hills around where we started, which is in our 3 original vineyards in Main Ridge, and Red Hill is the local village there as well. So very interesting topography, and but this wine is a combination of our fruit from down the hill at Coolart Road and up the hill at the on our vineyards up around Main Ridge. There's a little bit of I suppose I should tell you just a little bit about the viticulture, etc. We're very much focused on sustainable practices and really vineyard, soil health and vine health. We do undervine cultivation. We have organic vineyards, and we're in the process of getting our certification for Coolart Road, which is our largest vineyard, and we're probably around about 60% of this fruit comes from. And then from a winemaking point of view, very I suppose traditional winemaking techniques. We're really, the whole focus is about let the vineyards and in this case, let the region do the talking. This is our reserve level. So we have a 10x level, then a state level, and then we have our single vineyard wines. And this is, we spend quite a bit of time looking at this wine. Some years we've been doing an up the hill and down the hill estate, but in 2018 it was combined. So we get sort of the combination of those lovely red fruited characters and lovely and really lovely bright acidity from up the hill and almost sort of mineral tannins, whereas down the hill a little bit darker fruited and a little bit more sort of grippier tannins. So very different stylistically, and which is one of the interesting things about, the great things about the peninsula, which is that sort of great sort of tapestry of microclimates that we have, and terroir, if you like, that gives, which is of course expressed beautifully in Pinot. So there's a little bit of whole bunch in this wine, and it's we've used in 2018. We also used some of our new cement fermenters, which come from the north of Italy and around the Veneto region. and you see beautiful Nicovello fermenters, you know, in obviously in Piedmont, Champagne, and in Burgundy, and a lot in Bordeaux as well. And I think they really sort of give you, you know, a little bit more in a year like this, where we had a really lovely crop, a lovely season. You really get the sort of, it gives you a little bit of that chalky tannin, and brings the fruit back just a little bit. Yeah, actually, Kelvin, I mean, I don't know how much you'd like me to talk about the, you know, the vintage versus the wine, or 10 minutes and now how we make the wine versus just what we're seeing in the glass. But I suppose just to finish up on the winemaking, it's around 20% new oak, and really, you know, I think, you know, oak is such an important part of obviously it contributes a lot to a great Pinot, but you want it to be there, but really very much in the background, providing sort of, I suppose, that support and sort of to the tannins and to the structure of the wine. So that, I don't know, that was a bit of a rapid.
I think it's very elegant wine. It's got some a lot of clarity to it, very clean, lovely freshness, fragrant. The fragrance I'm getting off here is beautiful. And you mentioned the uphill and downhill, and I believe this is the two major sort of, is it the sub-regions of Mornington that's distinct by climate and soils? Is that correct?
How about this? Rather than me putting up oh no, you're not going to be able to read that, are you? No, I won't do that. I was going to show you a map. But do you want me to throw a map up just really quickly?
Go on then. Let's have a look. So
you know what? We'll try it, Kelvin. If it doesn't, you'll have to give me permission to do it, though.
Yeah, I'll see if I can get you on here. Let's have a look.
And if we can do it, we will. If we don't, we won't be hostage to it. No.
Well, I've changed you over, so let's see if that works. I've got to learn to change myself back then afterwards. So otherwise, it'll be over to you all the way through.
No, not at all.
I'm done now, Kelvin. You're like, I'm out. I've done everything. I can drink now.
No, I'm having trouble. Oh dear. Hang on, let's just have a look. Yeah, you know what? It's. I'm sorry, Kelvin. There's something not quite working here.
Okay, no worries, no worries.
So let's not worry about it. Let's not become a hostage to it. As I said, you know, I don't know if you can sort of see that, but it's almost like you've got this sort of big hook as you come down from up here in Melbourne, with Port Phillip Bay on one side in the middle. You've got the Bass Strait down here in Western Port. So we're surrounded by water. And as you come down from Melbourne to the peninsula, you're coming through these sort of sandy duplex soils around 50 metres above sea level, and it comes right up to the highest peak, which is at Arthur's Seat, and that's around 315 metres. And you get into the red volcanic soils and these rolling hills, and so there's a lot of differences. Obviously, there's differences in aspect and in elevation, also in the soils, as I mentioned. There's also about 25% more rain up the hill than down the hill, and all of these different contributors, including the cool air flows that come off Western Port and Port Phillip Bay and the Bass Strait between the mainland and Tasmania, are all have different influences. And really the net result of all of that is that our ripening from where we are here up in the top of the, sorry, it's not very good to show you this way, but you know, here we are in Red Hill Main Ridge, but the difference between sort of ripening here and say down at our Cool Out Road vineyard, which dare I say is about 10 minutes by car rather than tractor, is can be up to 30 days. So it's quite a dramatic, it's quite a big difference in ripening, and quite a big difference obviously in the season. Sometimes it can be as little as sort of 2 weeks, but yeah, this is, so we locally, the vignerons, I suppose, refer to this as sort of broadly as just up the hill and down the hill. Yeah. And yeah, and as I said, you know, you've got those sort of different characteristics, and this year, you know, this is a blend of the two. And I think what you're seeing with the 18 vintage is these lovely generosity of wines, and for really, for wineries that really are pursuing the best wine they can make, managing that yield and making sure the yields weren't getting too high, and keeping the vines in balance was obviously the key challenge, and what otherwise was just a really good year. And I think what you're seeing with the 18 wines is they're just starting to build more in that mid palate and to flesh out and just get a little bit more layered. And a great vintage, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it does actually reflect in the wine, and I'm also quite amazed at how much there is the micro knowledge of the land and the terroir in the region already. Because it's been, I know there's been viticulture there for many a year, but I think is it really recently from the 1970s that it's been on the level nowadays. So to have these now, to be able to see the intricacies of the lay of the land and the microclimates is really lovely to hear about, really. And you can sort of, I can smell it and taste it reflected in this.
Yeah, well, I think one of the great things about Pinot in Australia and cool climate winemaking in Australia is just how many great producers like Dolan Wines and many other Victorian and Tasmanian wineries are making single vineyard wines, even single block wines, where they really, giving that sort of best possible expression of sight, and really, and like the Cool Art Road, that's right. I think another single vineyard wine that we make, and and I think that we're learning obviously as quickly, as much as we can. Every year, I suppose, in a way, we sit there and we look at, like a lot of Australia, there was a very significant amount of Victoria planted to vine back in the 19th century. A lot of that disappeared because of phylloxera, etc., and economic changes which happened. UK being at peace with France and deciding to go back there rather than support their friends in Australia. No, that was. So it wasn't back until the 1960s that you'd see this sort of, and 70s, where you see this sort of renaissance back in the Australian wine industry, with new plantings back into these wonderful areas in Tasmania and Yarra Valley and Mornington and the Macedon Ranges, Gippsland and Geelong and other parts of Australia. And and over that probably, in the 80s and 90s, really significant plantings. And now, our vines are now sort of around that sort of 25 to 30 years of age. So you've got some really good vine age in these regions as well. So I think the combination of the vine age, the learning, of course, over the last 40 odd years, and the early pioneers and what they taught us, and growing the right varieties in the right places, I think is really seeing a wonderful, as I said, a wonderful renaissance, I think, in really high quality Australian wines.
Wonderful. No, and this has been reflected here as well in this wine. So maybe now we could have a taste of the Rob Dolan maker. Just with the Rob Dolan maker, do you happen to play football as well? I hear that Rob Dolan's a bit of a soccer star in his own right, and
Australian
people on the team are all a bit sporty.
He played for Port Adelaide, so he was an Australian rules footballer and quite famous. And a lot of what we do at Rob Dolan Wines is based around football. I have no interest in football. I'm married to a Kiwi who just wants to watch rugby. And I haven't lived here for a number of years, but they're football mad. So our wine club is called the Huddle Club. Rob's nickname is Sticks because he was very tall. He's very tall and had two very long legs. So there's a lot of football, but Aussie rules, not English football, not soccer.
Kelvin, you'd be horrified to know that most Victorians have no idea what rugby union is.
Okay, well, I'm not a sports person.
I wish I didn't. I wish I didn't.
No, it wasn't an attribute I was born with, being sporty. I was unfortunate. I was the kid who used to get picked last, and even then, they would still be debating whether I should still be in the team or not, or they just put me on the side somewhere. And that. But it was interesting to read all about Rob Dolan and his story, and just to see how, you know, he went from the sports side to the wine, and how he's related some of his past career into the future, into his present one of the
yeah, he's certainly a larger than life character, and I think Rob's been involved with the Yarra Valley since the early 90s, since 1992. So he's been there really since the renaissance of the second renaissance. We had one in the 60s, which was built on the back of Cabernets, and then in the late 80s into the early 90s, we had the second wave with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And Rob was at a winery called Yarra Ridge, which at the time was very ahead of its time, big producer of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So he's been around for a while. This is a 28 Rob Dolan white label Pinot. Oh, I better do the branding. I'm really crap at this stuff. So there you go, Rob Dolan. Our labels are all based on colours. That might have something to do with football, I'm not sure. The white label is our single vineyard label, and this is, for those of you who don't know, the Yarra Valley is located 45 kilometres northeast of Melbourne. We're at the base of a mountain range that runs right through to Queensland, the Great Dividing Range, and our little sort of part that informs the Yarra Valley is named the Warramate Ranges. It's kind of divided into two parts. We have the valley floor, which is on grey loam soils over fractured sandstone, 450 million years old. We were there out in the vineyard about a week ago, Rob and I, and we dug about that far, and you just hit this rock. So really good, very poor soils, but really good for, I think, the bigger reds, Shiraz and Cabernet, but certainly in pockets, Pinot and Chardonnay. This is actually from the upper Yarra Valley. This is from rich red volcanic soils. So a volcano erupted about 230 odd million years ago. And when we were up there the other day digging the soils are that deep, of just beautiful, rich red soils. So much richer. This vineyard is Willow Lake, and I like to call it the Grand Cru vineyard of the Yarra Valley. It was planted, staggered plantings over 6 years, starting in 1982. And it's a vineyard that you will often see named on labels. With Rob Dolan, we have long-term contracts. Rob's been working with these guys for decades now. I mean, when I first started with Rob in the 90s at Yarra Ridge, Willow Lake was just a name on a piece of paper, and it's now become one of probably the best vineyard in the Yarra Valley. And because of the relationship that Rob's had with them, we get the best picks of the fruit. So with Willow Lake, with Upper Yarra, you find this real perfume in the fruit, lots of acidity. 2018 was a kind of a weird year. We had those spring rains in 17, and then it just became this Indian summer. But we had quite a heat spike just before the Pinot was about to be picked, and that can be really problematic when you're handpicking fruit. But we were lucky because it is Upper Yarra fruit, it's a lot cooler at night, so we just chose to pick really early in the morning and transport the fruit so that it was nice and cool. There's a little bit of whole bunch. With whole bunch, we're not wedded to any formula. It depends on the lignification of the wood. If it's all green stems, it's not going in as whole bunch. We don't care. We play to the vintage, not to a particular style or winemaking philosophy. So 18, great whole bunch year, because warm, dry conditions, lots of lignification of the stems. So they went in about 30% whole bunch. There's some whole berry, all open pot fermentation. We do pigeage and, punch downs and the usual sort of gamut of winemaking. We only age in hogsheads, 300 litre barrels. We don't age in 500s or barriques. We don't age in 500s because you're carrying a tonne basically on a forklift, so it's more of an occupational health and safety issue than anything else. And then if you have hogsheads and barriques interspersed in your barrel stack, it's difficult. So we've made this decision that we just age in hogsheads. Mercury is probably the biggest proportion of new French oak, 30%, give or take, French oak, about 9 months of aging. The winemaking will vary vintage to vintage depending on the conditions, but the thing that won't vary is the fact that this is going to be coming from Willow Lake, because the whole point of this white label is that it is showcasing some of the best vineyards in the Yarra Valley. And it's a wine that's just got incredible perfume. I think that's one of the things that really sets the Upper Yarra apart for me, that real sort of rhubarb cranberry character. Down in the valley floor, you're tending towards a little bit more cherry, dark cherry, macerated strawberry, whereas in the Upper Yarra, you've got more of that, what I call sharp fruit, so cranberry and rhubarb. It's a beautiful one.
Definitely a lovely freshness again in this, and there's that nice depth, there's ripeness of the fruits, and there's an underlying savoury earthiness that's going through this wine as well, which I'm
and that's Willow Lake.
Okay.
And one of the things, I think, like Martin, we use our oak as a skeleton to hang the fruit on, rather than as the muscles sitting over the fruit. We want it there. We want you to know that it's there, but it's not a big part of the style. It's to provide structure, to provide length, to fill out that sort of mid palate.
Sorry, can I just ask? This is a single vineyard wine?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
A single terroir, single slope, single everything.
Yeah. So Willow Lake, the way the vineyard runs is it's on a hill, and the plantings are that direction, east-west plantings, and the Pinot runs down the hill. Now, we know that the best Pinot is actually in the top part of that hill, so we actually will only pick till halfway down the hill, and then someone else buys the rest of the fruit. So we can pick and choose pretty much. There's another part of the vineyard which is lower and flatter and a little bit more humid that we don't touch. That I don't know who takes that fruit, but we certainly take the fruit on the most exposed part.
25-year-old, more, 25 plus, 30?
82 to 88, and I can't tell you what year within that range the Pinot was planted.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's all MV6. MV6 is a pretty grunty clone. I remember working back in the Yarra in the 90s, and we'd have to work it. We'd be doing pump overs and punch downs to get anything out of it. And now you literally stand there with the plunger and go, that's enough. We've found as the vine age has come on, it's now more about what you don't do with Pinot Noir in the Yarra as to what you do. We've really pulled back a lot of our stuff that we were doing in the 90s that we wouldn't even consider doing now.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to the clones. As you're all probably aware, we've got phylloxera issues in the lower Yarra. It hasn't really hit the upper Yarra yet, so we're seeing it as an opportunity to replant to different clones. Climate's obviously changed since 1982 when 1988 when the vineyards were planted, so we're responding to that change by looking at different clones. So it's an exciting time ahead.
All right,
So I wasn't trying to hijack anything there, so.
Well, we'll touch a little bit more on clones in a little while, because I think with Pinot Noir, it's a necessity, isn't it? It goes part and parcel with it. Now, it was good to hear your questions there, Damien. And how do you think these two Pinots compare to, say, some of the Pinots you get from Tasmania?
Put me in the grill here.
Oh, yes.
Look, there are so many fantastic Pinot locations in Australia.
Say what you like, Damien. Come on.
Tassie
makes great Pinot.
I think
let's go balls out then.
But Damien,
these two Pinots are fantastic. I see certainly some slight differences in them in terms of intensity, not so much probably acidity or fruit weight or length, but it's Tasmania is really going for gold at the moment. It's
What do
It's,
you think that Tasmanian Pinots have that these two Victorian Pinots don't have? I'm going to be cheeky.
Yeah.
you are being
Can I-
cheeky.
Can I help? Can I help a little bit, Damien? I think it's a little bit unfair question in some respects, Kelvin, and I know you're not
Yes.
trying. I think you know, obviously for people, you know, for sitting in the UK, you're looking at Australia and you're thinking about Australian Pinot. There are big differences. Tasmania is quite a big place, so there's a.
Do you think
know,
it's like academic, or like it's sometimes academic versus customer focus as well?
Yeah, I think.
Like, is that big difference between like those two things?
Yeah, I think that you know, when you look at Tasmania, you know, there's so many different sub-regions in Tasmania. You've got the Tamar Valley, you've got the Coal Valley, you've got the Derwent Valley, all of those different areas which are quite different. Of course, as you do, and I was talking about that in the context of Mornington Peninsula, it's very difficult to really to pinpoint, I suppose, what is that unique character that sits there and defines each of them. And I think that there are some, I think it's probably easy to talk in some respects about the differences between the Yarra and Mornington. I think with Tassie, I find it personally very difficult sometimes. We do actually make a Tasmanian Pinot from Tamar, and I do find it difficult. But I think the thing they all have in common is that sort of lovely brightness, really lovely fruit, and you get
that,
a little bit
that acidity line as well. You know, that lovely fresh, prominent acidity. That prominent acidity will help you give greater fresh fruit element coming through in a wine, and that's what Tasmanian wines have in spades. And we're lucky that we can do this, but you know, it's I know there's a question coming up for Tasmanian wine, so I don't want to you know, maybe get on it too much to start with.
Okay. Just to compare with the wines that are coming from these two regions, because I know they've all got their own distinctions to them, and I think they're all fantastic. I mean, I Pinot Noir, a wonderful, great variety, and the ones I've tasted from Australia do get my thumbs up. And I think this is one of the reasons why we're doing this today, is to make people more aware of this and get it out there, because they need to be. People need to know about these fantastic wines. And Jenna, what do you think of the wines that we've had today?
Yeah, I suppose I must clarify. My question wasn't in a sense of like which Tasmania versus Victoria, which is better. It was more of a clarification between the distinction between what you see as a common trait from Tasmania versus what you would see from Victorian. Because I suppose in my role, when we list Pinots, which probably take up, I think, in majority of Australian restaurants now, when you look at wine lists, Pinot pages, Pinot Noir page is probably at least dedicated, I would say, majority of the space for reds, closely battled against Shiraz. Like, I think that they probably have a fair share, and I think that's where my question came from. But I think what I love about these two wines, when you sit them side by side, is that you can see regionality in them and you can see specific sites. But what I also love is that they demonstrate the varietal of Pinot Noir. Like, for me, they don't shy away from hiding any characteristic outside of what they are as Pinot. They show the pleasurable things that when people say, I like drinking Pinot Noir, why? This is what's in the glass. They're bright fruited, they've got acidity, they've got freshness, they've got compatibility to go with a lighter dish, but they've also got complexity with some spiciness and like some beautiful savoriness, that if you wanted to go a little bit down that game route or a type of red meat, it's got versatility. And I think that they showcase the beauty of why people love Pinot Noir, because of its versatility. But then they, at the same time, have these polar differences that you can underpin and understand why there is so much admiration for this grape variety within not only Australia, but the world. It's so perplexing and so complex. But at the end of the day, it's still a beautiful glass of wine that will bring pleasure to people when they say, I just want a glass of Pinot, but you know it's going to over-deliver in value. That's what's in the glass. And I think that they're beautiful. I love the structure in them both. And I think that it's pretty exciting because I suppose for us in Australia, one of the things is 18s are probably what we're just seeing come onto the market now from most wineries. So from my perspective, I haven't had the chance to look at too many 18s, obviously given COVID. So seeing the 18s at the moment is pretty exciting for me. I think that there's a great prospect that sits in both of them, looking quite great now, but I can see what Martin said, that there is a great potential for these as well, that I think, I mean, we also did a single Zoom of all the single vineyards of the 18s from Martin. So it was quite exciting to see that difference as well of the level, but see that the 18s for me, I think, are very exciting wines in Victoria. So yeah,
that's wonderful. Thank you. I think just talking about how these wines will develop. That I noticed that they're all got a screw top on them, and I know probably most Aussie wines have these on these. Does this affect aging at all, or how it ages, or the ability to age?
It does. It means that you will never have to pour one down a sink.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Absolutely.
So having done that, even within this last week, a beautiful producer who I love, Raffaele from Burgundy with a Clos de Bez, and I poured it down.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It was cool. It was Gerard Raffaele. Very corked, a beautiful producer, and I just think it's a great shame. But look, Kelvin, you know, you're stirring, as we would say in Australia, you're stirring the possum. You're gonna stir up that sort of age-old debate. But look, there is absolutely just to put it into perspective, just how quickly things changed here. In 2003. About 90%, I would say more than 90% of all wineries on the Mornington Peninsula, probably true in the Yarra Valley too, were sealed with a cork. And within 2 years, it had completely flipped the other way. And it's just that it's revolutionised, I think, the ageability of our wines. We do not have this massive bottle variation that we used to have to deal with. We certainly don't have to deal with cork taints. We don't have to deal with premature oxidization, particularly in our white wines. And I think when you look to Burgundy and you see what's going on with white Burgundy, it's a great shame when you've got such beautiful wines being produced and they're being continually let down by the closure. But look, the end of the day is that, I'll finish and get off my soapbox on this. A good cork will do the same job. Well, I should say that every screw cap will do the same job as the best cork. So, you can get great bottles of wine under cork, of course, but I think for something for Pinot and Chardonnay, it's great for the ageability of the wines. It eliminates all of the things that interfere with what the wine would otherwise be. And I think it's a great and positive step that most Australian winemakers have embraced.
Yeah, it's good to see. But is this something similar you've noticed in the wines? Is you find there's more consistency, a better quality in the product?
I mean, I just think it's a no-brainer moving to screw cap. It is better. It's all about the liner at the end of the day. The technology has certainly advanced since we first started working with screw caps, and we had some issues, I think, when we first started working with them. But, there's about 5 years ago, there was a paper published that the only oxygen in a cork or a screw that comes in contact with the wine is the ullage in the bottle. Nothing comes through the cork. Despite all the romance of what they're telling us, if the cork is starting to fail and shrink, yeah, you're going to get more oxygen through. But if it does its job and acts as a closure, the only air that's going to ever be in contact with that wine until you open it is the air in the ullage. So it's exactly the same. And when I was at Roseworthy, we had, they did some trials, Penfolds as it was known then, back in 1973, of screw cap, crown seal, cork, Riesling, and we got to buy them when they were emptying the cellars. And the wine under screw cap certainly aged better, and that's with screw cap that was just a screw cap. It wasn't even the technology that were with the linings that we have today. And they were still quite fresh. I had my last bottle probably early 2000s, I think, and it was fresh as a daisy. So yeah,
And to be,
I don't know why we continue to have this conversation, because screw caps is the way to go.
I'll cut it there.
Cut it out.
You've got to give
Well-
people what they want. You've got to give people what they want. And what they
What about
want
the
is,
wine?
fast, efficient service in restaurants so that they don't have to wait like, oh, that's corked, to send it back. Like, that's good. Go.
Yeah.
And that's
Talking
labour
about this-
time as well. Like, it's restaurants and bars net profit.
Yeah.
We were talking about this the other day, and everyone was saying, oh, the romance cork. But in a good restaurant, you don't see the som opening the bottle.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
they just turn up with the bottle open. So, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
No
Yeah,
brainer.
Kelvin, you've touched the nerve now. No.
Yes,
Let's move.
I'll move on. Yeah, because the other thing I was going to ask about is these both are using wild yeasts. Is this something that's part of the terroir or part of the philosophy, or just something that you do in the region, or it's something that you feel is important to the wine in itself?
Well, I
Is
can. Oh, sorry. Go on, Meg. You go first.
I did my honours thesis and my MW thesis on wild yeast. So a winery that I was working at in the Yarra, we're doing a whole thing on microbial terroir. So the microbial populations in the soil, on the grapes when you bring them in, during fermentation, during malolactic fermentation and post MLF. At the end of the day, it's Saccharomyces cerevisiae pretty much that finishes everything, but the thing that starts everything is a whole range of yeast. So you're adding layers of complexity to it. You run the risk of stuck fermentation, but if you're smart and you don't go in with super clean juices in the terms of whites and high sulfurs, you're going to get through. I have done, at the last winery I worked at, 95% of the ferments
Mm-hmm.
were wild, and I never had a problem. So, yeah,
I think there's been a big change, hasn't there, Meg? I mean, Kelvin, I think you could go back to, we talked about the wine industry, that sort of that second wave, if you like, in the 70s and 80s, and when the first Australian wine universities, Roseworthy and of course Charles Sturt, etc., were teaching in those early days. It was really a lot of the textbooks and a lot of the teachings were really about more focused on, I suppose, warmer climate viticulture, warmer climate sort of winemaking, but also, I suppose, safe winemaking as well. And doing wild ferments was certainly frowned upon, even not that long ago, as being a bit risky, etc. But a lot of the early pioneers, really. I think about Nat White down here at Main Ridge Estate and others, Rick McIntyre over at Muriduck Estate and lots of others who really experimented with wild yeast ferments in the early days. And today, I'd say again, probably 95% of all producers on the Mornington Peninsula would be using, letting the wild yeast do the fermentation, and believing very much so that it sort of adds to the complexity of the wines, and it's adding a dimension to the wines which would otherwise not be there. And certainly, if you're a terroirist or a terrorist, whatever you want to call it, you certainly, I think, embracing that, and natural malolactic fermentations, I think, is a very natural thing to do.
And do you think there's also a more of an expectation nowadays from wine drinkers themselves, or just anybody, whether it's beer or food, that we want a bit more provenance? We like to know that things are a bit more of where they came from. The interest there, they've got that sort of individuality about them, and this is kind of what we're looking for. It's what people are looking for in the wines as well. And I just think, for me, it gives that additional interest, right? And I do agree, Martin, that it was not so long ago, even when I was doing my diploma, there was parts of it there was all about, there was a lot of frowning on natural yeast, it being like these bad guys that it's really risky, that things could go really wrong, and you've got to rely on all these sort of yeast from the laboratory. And it doesn't seem to be the case. People are making these wines and getting on with them and making fabulous wines. So
I think I teach WSET. I'm heavily involved with it, and I think that's you know, it's a safe bet. And I know in the MW once I was told that wines that were made with commercial yeast all tasted the same, which again is not true. So I don't think it's a moving scale rather than a black and white divide on this. But certainly when I was at uni in the early 90s, we were training winemakers to go and work for big companies. I mean, we were pressing reds off at 6 Beaumay. You know, they still had plenty of sugar. They finished because we're making soft, entry-level wines. And it was at that time, you know, I came back to the Yarra Valley, which was tiny at the time. But most of my 13 graduates that I graduated with, they went to work for big companies because that's where the jobs were. And as Martin said, it was warm climate. Let's get it through. Let's make it safe. Often big branded wines, so they had to be the same year on year on year. And I think our industry is so much more diverse now, and that's allowed us to be more diverse in our winemaking.
And I think Meg, maybe worth adding as well. I think we, you know, there much better understanding of the risks that we need to be managing in the winery. So, you know, obviously one of the big risks, you know, is something like Brettanomyces, and, you know, we don't want Brett in our wines. I think I think about Victoria and Tasmania and Pinot producers, you know, and various workshops that we hold together at various times. You know, there's a deep understanding of those risks and, you know, zero tolerance for faulty wines. But at the same time, you know, getting the win is, you know, all those extra things that come with it.
And there is definitely,
you know, there's very few, like you say, Britty or anything like that. We've got very few things like that coming out now. I guess Tasmania. We're in that crossroads point of being in that 20 to sort of 25 year mark of having the old guard producers that were farmers and whatever else that they did that, and now we've got the new sort of generation coming in, planting or taking over vineyards, and now we're really now we're really going to see something, I think, in the next sort of 10 to 15 years.
And generally, you seeing this as well in the restaurants, that people are wanting more handcrafted wines, they want to know more about the provenance, that things are made in a more of a sustainable, natural way in this sort of.
Yeah, like I think there's something to be said for in terms of our there's two different elements to look at. I think that in general there's a much broader consumer awareness in general about wine, not just Pinot, not just winemaking, but in general the consumer patterns and their knowledge level from when I started to in the industry to where consumer knowledge is now has done a 10 jump fold. And people are looking to have somebody explain the wine and tell the story behind it. And there's a sense of understanding. They want to know where their wine is sourced from, how it's produced. They understand terminology a lot more. And there's also been the other side of that, I was saying, there's been an increase in the knowledge of people who deliver that information to the guest. And what that has also mean is there's also been a transition, not just from, I suppose, the sommelier perspective, but I think there's been a breakdown in Australia of this stuffiness that's associated with a wine professional who's serving wine and only trying to get someone to buy the most expensive bottle on the list and make the most profit for a restaurant. I think that there's been a tenfold movement from consumers who are aware and want knowledge and want to soak it in and are like sponges and are like want to be loyal and want to be local and support. But there's also been the other side of that, which is professionals who are getting together and who are trying to break down the barriers that have stemmed from this weird notion that our profession is something that is trying to either persuade in a negative way or just, overcharge or whatever it is. But there's been a drive from both sides, which has increased the value for everyone. So you do see a lot of consumers asking, where does this come from? What can you tell me about this producer? You'll have a lot of people come in and look through this and go, yeah, I know that, I've had that one. Oh, I don't know this person. Can you tell me about them? And it's amazing. It's incredible to see. And it's wonderful to know that, people want that information, but then there's also people that don't, and it's a balancing and judging act, and that is hospitality. But it's lovely to have that conversation when you have that conversation with someone, and to be able to, number one, have also as well winemakers who want to share that, because that was probably also another barrier. There's been always a bit of a secret, even now, like people who go and visit Burgundy, the Burgundians don't want to tell us anything. In Australia, we're very lucky that our winemakers will invite us, open arm, open up, tell stories, and let us then pass that on to the guests. And that makes such a difference as well. So I think definitely that's something that has changed the way that wine is consumed and indulged and loved in Australia. And I hope that the rest of the world is similar. But I'm not.
Something that I've been trying to push on for a long time down here now in Tasmania is this is maybe completely different of what we're trying to talk about, but like a Tasmanian sommelier accreditation, but that it could be a Victorian sommelier accreditation, a New South Wales accreditation. People that are based down here that have ultra big dog level knowledge of what's happening in their state. Quartermaster sommelier style ideas, but that it's up in the levels, but it's based in your state. And I think that's probably a fantastic idea for people to maybe think about, if train the ground level staff up to be able to have this level of knowledge, shoot for something. I don't know, that always seems like a good idea to me.
Well, that kind of knowledge suits Pinot Noir down to the ground, doesn't it? Because it's all about that terroir, that micro terroir, that micro knowledge. That's fantastic. And while we're staying on sort of the micro, I wanted to ask, we touched on it earlier, the thing about clones. Because every time I seem to think, when you get around people with Pinot Noir, they naturally start to err and start talking about clones, and you're thinking, why? So we'd have a look at, well, what are clones? Why are they used, and which ones particularly work for you? I know that you've mentioned a few, and I know on Martin's list I was looking at yours, there's even a Spedding clone, I believe. I've got so is it part of your DNA in this Pinot Noir here? That's what I'll need to ask.
That must be a typo. There's definitely not a Spedding clone, but I think there might be, in this, this is mainly MV6 and a little bit of 115, etc. But look, we use these terms, and we shouldn't use them because it's going to turn a lot of people off as we get into geeky things. But there's over 200 sort of clones. Even some speculate many more than that of Pinot. And I suppose what's interesting about them is they're all slightly different. They've obviously got their own character, and I suppose what we do as growers and is we're looking to see which of these clones with the different attributes that these clones have, which of them suit our sites, our climate, and what works in the Mornington Peninsula may not work in the Yarra Valley, or what works up in the higher parts of the Yarra Valley won't work down necessarily as well down in the lower, warmer parts of the valley. And same is true in Tasmania, etc. But look, at the end of the day, they're interesting to talk about. Winemakers have spent a long time talking about different clones. I think, very lucky in Australia. We've talked about a clone called MV6, which Meg mentioned earlier. And that's worthwhile talking about, because really that was the first wave of of clonal material or vine cuttings coming to Australia.
This came from France, right? From Burgundy.
Sorry?
From Burgundy, this clone.
Yeah, they came from a guy called James Busby. There were several early attempts to bring vine cuttings into Australia, starting in, you know, sort of the very early 1800s. James Busby went and did a tour through Spain and France, and you know, took cuttings from of all these in these key regions, including in Burgundy. And he wrote a journal, which I have a few different copies of. It's a fascinating journal as he's going through Burgundy and these other regions to collect the cuttings. Now, he picked up these cuttings in 1830 and brought them back to Australia. And he had over 500 odd cuttings. People were very generous with him. And one of those for Pinot was the cuttings he took from Clos Veugeot. And Clos Veugeot at that stage used to grow Chardonnay and Pinot. He brought them back, and of course they disseminated around Australia. Look, it's a long story, and there's a lot of books that have been written around this, but basically, you know, we end up with that material being planted in the Hunter Valley and other places. And MV6, which is Mother Vine 6, which is a propagation from one of those early plantings in the Hunter Valley, is believed to be from those original cuttings from Clos Veugeot. So we're very lucky to get that quality material early on. We then had, you know, in the 60s and 70s, we had various schemes to bring vine cuttings in. And without going into all the details, and Meg has got probably a lot more to add to this than myself, I think what maybe just for the average Pinot drinker to know is that there has been, there's a lot more now, and there's been a lot of new material provided in Australia for Pinot over these last decades, and today we have an amazing choice of clones which we can plant. In the Yarra Valley, of course, they're doing a lot of replanting in certain parts because of phylloxera, and opportunity to look at these clones with these different attributes and work out really what works best. And I think the quality of the wine that is being produced, the quality of Pinot that's being produced in Australia, is very much also reflective of that vine material that we've been able to access over the last 20 or 30 years.
Mm-hmm. And would you like to expand on any of that, Meg, or add?
I mean, not really. Martin's covered it all. The thing that I find interesting about MV6 is that it's a pre-phylloxera. You know, the mother vine is a pre-phylloxera cutting. That's what I find always so fascinating, particularly in the Yarra, since we're hit with the mother of all diseases at the moment.
But Meg, that's a really important point. I mean, these when James Busby went and took these cuttings, and he took them from Hermitage as well, and he took Shiraz cuttings, and those vines that he took cuttings from are still sitting in South Australia from the original plantings in the 1840s. And these were the vines which, unfortunately, in Europe had to be rubbed out because of phylloxera and replanted. So there's a lot of pre-European phylloxera material here in Australia as a result.
Yeah,
well, if phylloxera came in, that it would just wipe them out, wouldn't it?
Well, we've got a lot of it's grafted onto rootstock now, so we've taken the vine and grafted. I mean, the Yarra we're having, because of the heritage material we have a Scion Me Up program. So from the historical vineyards, the Yeringbergs and the Yarra Yearings and Montana Estate and Mount Mary, we're grafting planting material onto rootstock so that we have the original planting material on rootstock. We know that rootstock, you know, despite what the French thought it was going to decimate their wine industry, it's not. But yeah, I mean, we're looking at Abel clone, you know, from Tassie, from New Zealand, well, from France via New Zealand, a little bit illegally.
All these wonderful stories.
And the clones, they give different qualities to the Pinot Noir. So I see, obviously, when I'm looking at the notes here, the tech sheets, they're used as part of a blend then. So it's part of the the winemaker, I guess, for you guys then to make an assessment of what's going to work and the kind of wine that you want to create from that. Is that right? Is that what you're using them for as well? So rather than being different grape varieties as such, it's the differences in character of each of these sort of clones that then you can add into the wine to make a more complex wine.
I think rather than, I think the way I would describe it, Kelvin, is that the way we use clones is we're looking for what would give us the best quality in a particular site. So, as I said, the clones that we might use to grow up the hill, if I can again use that term, in Mornington versus what we might grow in the warmer, drier parts of down the hill are different. And we, as Meg said, there's some one, Able clone is a clone that sort of has been around for about the last 10 years or so, 777, and there's Burgundy clones from Dijon. There's other clones which originated through Davis University in the US, which had material from Switzerland and other places. But they're really, I think, anyway, certainly my thinking about clones is what is going to do best on the site and give us the best expression of site, rather than necessarily whether or not it's going to bring a particular attribute for the wine, other than quality, of course.
Okay, that sounds good. And I know time's getting on a little bit now, so I wanted to maybe move on to maybe go to the macro now and look at what your audience is and your markets currently for your Pinot Noir, and where your aspirations are for where you'd like to see the Pinot Noir from Australia go to. Now, I know there's two main events that you have out there. One's the Pinot Celebration, which is your on-trade event that you have every 2 years. I was lucky enough to attend last year. And then I believe you've got another thing called, is it Pinot Palooza, which is the
Pinot Palooza, yeah.
And it's out because I've picked up one of the original books I picked up here when I was over.
Palooza.
Yeah, and I was wondering.
Pinot Palooza in 2020 was going to go back to Japan. They were going to launch in New York and LA, and obviously COVID has put a bit of a dampener on all of that. It's a massive event. It's a consumer event. We're in front of the people who drink Pinot, and you're just talking to them, and it's on a friendly basis. It can be a little bit of a piss up. I know in Japan there's.
It always is. It always is.
Yeah. In Japan, I was talking to an importer of the company that I used to work for, and he was saying that you don't really make a lot of contacts doing Pinot Palooza, but I actually don't think that that's what it's about. It's putting Pinot in front of people, and it's a great event.
And I think Kelvin, we forget that it wasn't that long ago that Pinot wasn't really a particularly popular variety.
It's not a great variety that instantly springs to mind when I think of Australia. When you think of Australia, you're usually thinking of these big.
Yeah, well, I think
that's Pinot Noir is, it's that.
I think the wonderful thing about Pinot is that, particularly if I think about it in the UK context, and I love coming to the UK. I love meeting UK consumers and going out to restaurants and wine bars, etc. And I think that there's been this sort of great deepening of the understanding of what Australia is as a place as well, and that it's not just one big hot place. It's just a big desert with a little bit of green stuff around the corners. It's we have over 60 wine regions in Australia, and there's incredible diversity across them all. And I think what you've seen really over the last 20 years, and again, Meg can talk to this from her early days, I think, you're seeing regions which are really understand what varieties suit their climates. And when I went to the UK in the early years, and think back in 03, 04 or 05, the Australian Pinot that was there was coming from places like coming like from the Margaret River, from Rutherglen, from Hunter Valley, places which really you would, I think, fairly be able to say don't represent, probably aren't the best places necessarily to be growing Pinot. Just like Cabernet shouldn't probably be grown here in the Mornington Peninsula, you know, for exactly the same reason. So, you know, we've got this wonderful tapestry of sort of climates here, and you know, now Pinot is grown in cool climates. And you know, when we all remember the Sideways movie, of course, back in the early 2000s, which really was a real turning point for the popularity of Pinot. And I think Jenna mentioned as well, you know, how much Pinot represents now on a wine list in Australia, whereas probably going back 15, 16 years, it was a very, very, very small part of it. So it's been a wonderful, I think, renaissance, if you like, of these, seeking out these wonderful areas and sites to grow Pinot and Chardonnay, to give to really show how good they can be. So it's an exciting time for these events. I think these events reflect that popularity. The Pinot celebration the first one was held in 2003. The one you came along to was our 9th Pinot celebration. We hold it every 2 years, and you know, you think back on the evolution of Pinot during that time. It's been extraordinary, and now you have Pinot Palooza, which is doing a great job with consumers and reflecting that popularity.
I think that's fantastic, the Pinot Palooza, because this is something that we could handily do in the UK. I'm gathering that you know, the UK is one of Australia's top markets, and to have something like this come over would be fabulous, because it is about continuing that exploration of what you guys have now got to offer. You know, you in yourselves, it's like that, you know, you demonstrate that incredible knowledge and local knowledge of great varieties and wines and winemaking. And it's about now being able to share that with us. And the Pinot Noir particularly, I mean, as a Pinot Noir fan, the more the merrier really, and getting it out there and getting your wines out there is something that, you know, as a wine business here in the Northeast is what we want to do. Is there anything else you feel that is the next steps forward for you guys, or you'd like to see happen to enable Pinot Noir to be seen on the world stage, you know, from Australia itself? Because I think what you're trying to achieve at the moment, it seems to be that looking at that sort of local, that terroir, really handcrafted wines, and that's kind of putting you up on a platform with other renowned Pinot Noir regions. Is this something that you want to get to and hold it out there to be as renowned as some of the other bigger guys who are more well known through their history?
Keep all the Australian Pinot in Australia. We're not giving it to you.
No. Yeah, we'll go broke, thanks very much, particularly with the on-trade being closed for most of the year.
I'm joking.
Yeah, I know. I think that don't compare ourselves to the rest of the world. Let's just do what we do well and give our wines that sense of place and where they're from, and we will stand very proudly on the world stage. You know, I hate this, we're, you know, it's like a certain style in Burgundy. We're not. We are, for my place, Yarra Valley, and for Martin, his Yarra Valley. It speaks, Pinot Mornington, it speaks of that area, and that's what we should be doing more and more of. We should be, you know, I saw in your comments that what are the potentially emerging regions of the Yarra Valley? Well, the Yarra Valley and Mornington are not emerging. They have emerged, and I think Tasmania is about to step up and take its other rightful place on that stage with us as the 3 Pinot regions in Australia.
I agree.
Adelaide Hills, but you know.
Yeah. Well, I agree with Meg's comments completely. I think that's very true, and I think, Kelvin, just you know, to make a very quick comment on this, I think that, you know, as Jenna has sort of mentioned, you know, a lot of us, really the great Australian Pinot has been really consumed in Australia for a long time, and we probably haven't been as actively exporting it as much as, say, other countries have. And that's changing, and I think it's changing because there are easier routes for small producers to market than what there used to be, because we were all, basically most producers are pretty well family-owned, small wineries, not large commercial sort of operations, and you know, it's very difficult for those sorts of wineries to get into to export, and of course the cost of, you know, visiting overseas, etc. But that's changed dramatically, and I look at, you know, the UK market now and see the incredible breadth of wines that the Pinots that are available there, from Tasmania, from Mornington, from Yarra Valley, from Adelaide Hills, as Meg said, and of course across Europe and other parts of the world. And it's fantastic, and I think that really is our next sort of not challenge, but our next sort of, really, I think the job that we've got to do is to tell more of the world about, you know, and show more of the world, I suppose, our wines, and let the wines themselves do the talking.
And that sounds great to know. But I would say over here in the Northeast, if we can give you a hand with that, we're more than happy to do that and taste some more of your fabulous wines. Now, I just want to say thank you for your time this morning. I think we'll kind of wrap it up here. I think, Martin, you might have to close it down because you are the host. But I just want to say
lovely
thank you.
to see you all.
Yes, and I mean, you've such a wealth of knowledge. I think the wines are absolutely gorgeous. I'm looking forward to putting more on our shelves and getting more out there. Stay safe out there. Hopefully we'll all have a great new year, and we'll get the Pinot celebration next year. It'll be a fabulous success, so we can get more back on track with things. Thank you for people watching. If you want to catch up on this or other Vinarchys, then please do so either through mywinelife.nl or at guestwines.com. You can also sign up to our newsletter at Guest Wines to stay in touch with all things about wine. Up until then, just thank you all. Have a good day. Look after yourselves, and cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All the best.
Bye. I've finished mine.
See you, Jenna.
Thank you.
See
Bye.
you, Damien. See you, Meg.